BioGeometry is not the only one, but I would say it's one of the more complete systems that's on the earth today, and one of the premier, I would say, systems that really identifies and creates solutions. But, I start to think about especially the fact that there has been government-wide projects in Switzerland where they harmonize the entire town, because people were having serious issues with the cell towers, and it was amplifying all the geopathic stress in the area, which are basically sick earth energy lines. They're energy lines that naturally exist. They're not necessarily a problem, but they are the communication network of the planet. And when we add all of these different energy qualities that amplify the more negative effects of these things, then it becomes a problem. And in places like Switzerland, when they applied the entire citywide solution, I mean, this was not verified by them. They had a third party government official scientific team basically go through the whole town and verify that people were having less epileptic seizures. Birds and bees were coming back to the environment. Cows that were having infertility after the cell towers were installed were now back to normal.
Longevity isn't luck, folks. It's a lifestyle built on awareness, habits, culture, and intention. Welcome to the Age with Intention podcast, where we explore how people around the world live longer, live stronger, think clearer, and age with purpose. Now, today's conversation is one thing a lot of high performers desperately need to hear, because we live in a world obsessed with optimization, supplements, cold plunges, routines, productivity, biohacks, but very few people are asking, what happens when the nervous system itself never feels safe? That's happening a lot. So our guest today is Adam Fallen, nervous system regulation coach, founder of the Fallen Frequency, professional touring musician, and someone who experienced the reality of burnout firsthand after years inside the grind of the music industry. What makes Adam's work unique is that he doesn't just look at the body mechanically, he also explores the environmental and energetic stressors most people never think about, the hidden interference patterns that may be impacting sleep, recovery, performance, and overall vitality. So this is going to be a deep conversation around burnout, regulation, intentional living, and what high performance actually looks like when it's sustainable. Okay, so we're going to welcome Adam to the show right now as soon as he comes in. Adam, welcome, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. This is a pleasure.
Awesome. We have lots to talk about, so let's get started with your story first. Let's have people know where you're coming from. Take us back to the version of Adam before the burnout, right? What was it like touring the profession? You toured professionally. Yeah. What instruments did you play? Let us know how does it go? How does
Absolutely. So I was really blessed. I grew up with a very talented, and still to this day, a very talented painter, my mom. And, there's always, and even my dad has a lot of artistic talents. And so a mix of all those things, I really feel like it helped me have a platform to just explore all the different areas, and especially even growing up in Vermont, just being connected to nature, and then moving to Charleston, which also has its own beautiful nature and beaches in South Carolina. But through that process, I was put in an academic type of performing arts school that you audition for in 6th grade, and I got in. And it was really cool because you had an hour and 45 minutes every day of your major, and that was visual arts for me. At that time, I really wanted to design cars. I was obsessed with just all sorts of engineering things and animals and biology in many ways in the background. And that really just led me to then having the opportunity of exploring guitar, because they want to make sure that you're in the right major. So they have this program where they put you in an exploratory. And it was pretty funny. I was actually pretty frustrated that I had to, every Friday, be in a different class because I just wanted to draw. But then something about the guitar just clicked. It was crazy. I mean, of course, I learned Smoke on the Water. That was one of the first things. And just ever since that moment, I think at the time, too, I was a skater kid. So I was skateboarding with all these older guys. They were playing like loud rock and roll, like Nirvana. Something about that energy just made me curious. And when I brought the guitar home to my dad and was showing him, and there was something that clicked for him too. So he showed me Jimi Hendrix and Led Zeppelin and all these
Ooh,
incredible artists
nice.
that just got me fully hooked in. I'll never even forget just the place I was when I first heard Led Zeppelin 1, just like something about that. But then that just took me further and further. And luckily, because my dad was in the restaurant industry, he was friends with a lot of the best musicians in town because they played at his restaurants and he had a great relationship with them. So he asked one of them to start teaching me, and it just kept unfolding. It was crazy. I mean, all of a sudden, you know, there'd be days where I would spend sometimes 3, 4, even up to 8 hours in my room just practicing, playing the blues, just all these incredible artists that really laid a foundation for me to explore. And that brought me to jazz. And then through, actually, they had a jazz program in the School of the Arts as well. You could be in jazz band if you tried out. And so I think in 10th grade, I got into that, and that opened me up to a whole different vantage point too of music. And it just kept going and going to the point where when I was 18, I was performing professionally all over the place. I was doing a lot of the late night gig scene in Charleston, and there's a lot of great music in the R&B and jazz and soul music world. And I happened to have the opportunity to go on tour with Clay Aiken at 18 years old with one of the
Wow.
main artists that I was playing with at the time, and she was one of his backup vocalists, and they met on American Idol, and it just was crazy because I was with all these legendary musicians on the road,
18
and
years old, small amount.
they hazed the crap out of me, but they were still very respectful and taught me a lot, and that just kept going. I think that gave me the vantage point that you could make good money on the road as a touring musician playing guitar. And then I felt this call to go to New York, but I didn't know how I was going to get there. And at the time, one of my best friends, and she was really noticing that my ego was already starting to inflate in Charleston. So she was like, "You can't wait. You just got to go to New York." So she basically found a way that we could move to New York. I got to New York, and within a year, I was 20 years old. I think maybe right before I turned 21, I got to play the Super Bowl with Queen Latifah in the
No
opening
way.
ceremony in 2014. Just stuff like that just kept pulling me forward, and it started out as this really passionate dream, and it still is. But I think the hidden blessing in all of it was that it was bringing me in learning how to hustle in New York City and being able to play 4 or 5 nights a week and then going on the road. But it just kept going and going. And, about 6 years in, I started to hit a major burnout where I was starting to ask myself, why am I playing these gigs that I don't want to do? And it was money driven a lot of the time. Sometimes it was passion. But a lot of the time, when you are doing something like that full time, you have to say yes to a lot of things that you don't necessarily vibe with. And then, as I was asking questions, I happened to hear this podcast with Gabor Mate about the healing that he's done with a lot of clients on addiction and childhood trauma. And it really resonated with me because I've seen how addiction can rip apart families, and even have seen addictive patterns in my own family. And he brought up things like plant medicines and ayahuasca and ibogaine and all these things, but in a clinical setting where it was really about getting to the root cause of what was keeping someone stuck and being able to free that up so that they were no longer reaching for that thing in the first place. And that just really made me start to wonder if there was a way that I could maybe work with a shamanic healer or practitioner or something like that. And I'm just a musician at that time hustling. I was thinking, there's no way I'm going to ever go down to the jungle. Lo and behold, I was on a wedding gig, and they told me that they knew a very incredible, like one of the directors, which was very trippy because, I mean, the wedding scene is pretty uptight. So I was not thinking that I would find it through that, but it pulled me in because he said that he knew someone that was very talented and had been going back and forth to the jungle for 15 years, lived in upstate New York, and would be able to, I would be introduced to her if I was interested. And so fast forward, I went to a ceremony. I had an entire reconnection to all of my inner child fascinations from biology and nature and art, and really just seeing that the part of my life that was music was just the tip of the iceberg of what I was discovering within myself, and that there was so much more to the picture that I was really just suppressing because we're told we have to niche and do one thing, and that's the only thing we can do, and be an expert and all that stuff. And of course I do have that motivation to get to that and the discipline. Yeah, it really kind of messed me up because then I was thinking, okay, well, what do I do? How do I find a way to engage with this? The universe just kept bringing other people to me, and I found Paul Chek and heard him on a podcast, and it really resonated with me because he reminds me so much of a lot of my music mentors. He's really grounded, a little bit hardcore in a certain way, just because he came up through the military and he was a car mechanic, and then
Right?
he got into physical therapy and massage, and he just knows all these cross correlations, and the way that he lays it out is very matter of fact. He's not beating around the bush. And there was something about that. I mean, for people that have maybe been around the jazz music scene, it's very much like that. There's a lot of people that, they mean well, but they're telling you to your face, like, you got to go home and practice. You
Yep.
definitely
You the tough
didn't learn
love.
the music. And that was helpful because, you're getting an honest feedback so you can grow. And hopefully it doesn't deter you from actually following your dream. But that was the same thing with Paul, and I got to the point where I think I was in Africa on the road playing this gig with Deborah Cox, who's like a R&B legend. And I remember it kind of hit me because everyone was downstairs having drinks in the hotel lobby, and I was upstairs just binging Paul Chek videos and just watching all these YouTube videos. And I started to think, I probably want to work with a Czech practitioner. And so I started to work with a Czech practitioner. He was amazing, and it just kept unfolding to the point where I realized I wanted to go to the school just to at least do the first level for myself and my own health and my family and all that, that I, can be a living example of all this stuff that he was teaching. And that was right in the middle of the pandemic. I flew out. I mean, I had started the classes in 2019, but then in 2020, I went to the first in-person class, and it changed my life. Like,
Did
so
you go to
much of that.
San Diego?
Yep, San Diego. Yep,
Yep.
Carlsbad.
For those people who don't know, Paul Chek, he's one of the pioneers. I started following him back in, I think it was the late 90s, and I jumped into his. He has several levels, which is awesome. And
Yeah.
it's, you could look at it as holistic health coaching, but he also does a lot of biomechanics work with the body, one of the pioneers in that. And he got into, obviously, he knows a lot of Chinese medicine, Ayurveda. He's well rounded. He's amazing. That's why
Yeah.
when you say, what's the niche or the niche, whatever you want to call it, he's one of them that could tell you, you could learn more than just one integration. You got to
Yeah.
integrate, whether it's holistic medicine, whether it's like music with you. You actually did jazz, you did rock, and all kinds of artists everywhere.
Yeah.
So there is ways to do it, right? And I
Yeah.
think it's, just finding the time, taking it step by step, and going as deep as you want. Because with Paul Check, you could go very deep.
Oh
And
yeah,
yeah,
there's 5 levels, and a lot of people take sometimes 10 years to do all those 5 levels because it's
crazy.
one side is the holistic lifestyle coaching, which was what I was initially interested in, but then I got really deep into all the biomechanics stuff because you look
Yeah,
the integrated movement specialist, or it was originally called exercise coach, is an incredible thing in itself, but then you're required to become a Czech practitioner. I'm a level 2, and I started my third year, but that it was just so much great information. I wanted to integrate a lot of it. But yeah, you learn everything from how the spine works with the glands and organs, the mental emotional aspects, how you can get to the root cause of why someone's sick. So it was, yeah, no easy feat learning, especially coming completely blind from, I grew up with a lot of people that talked about holistic health. Luckily, I had a holistic health doctor and chiropractor growing up, and I think that planted a lot of seeds for me. But just seeing someone like him that, like you said, is a fully integrated man that has a lot of these different things and shows you that everything is a mirror for itself. So I mean, of course, I do recommend people to find one thing that you can get really good at so that you learn the art of like mastering something. And not to say that I feel like I'm a master yet, but I have put the 10,000 hours in, and it's still something that is a mirror for, I mean, when I sit down and play, guitar, especially now, it's like a mirror for me of where I'm at that day, where I'm at in my life, because you are able to interact with this thing that you've been doing for a long time. It's the same with movement for a lot of people, dancing. I think especially art, like that's a big theme
Heck
because
yes.
just to even finish like kind of the burnout part, it's like all those things were happening and I was starting to get introduced to that and it just made me it was almost scary because I felt like maybe I was gonna leave music behind because that's how people were making me feel because a lot of people are very purist. But now looking back, I realize it was literally just asking me to go deeper inside myself so that I could be a whole human being because that's what we need more of in the world. I mean, there's a million great artists and musicians and things like that. And really, like, we don't necessarily need more of those. We need more good humans, honestly.
All
And I
right.
mean,
Yes.
so that's really what it, and it was like my soul was asking me to take the leap of faith and it was scary, but it was one of the best things that I ever did because now as I'm integrating everything in my art and learning through things like biogeometry, the vibrational reality we live in, I realized that music, I was always engaging in a certain way with spirituality. I just had no clue and no
Yeah.
tools to really recognize that. And now as I'm uncovering this, I'm realizing that we live and work with a lot of these subtle energy qualities, whether we know it or not. It's just a matter of if we open our eyes to it, we can see a whole new world and it becomes even more inspiring, in my opinion.
Yeah, I believe it because music, it's art, right? And that's a lot of, what do you want to say? Like if you really connect with your innate intelligence, it brings about that, like you said, that artistic, the best artist you could be, you could become
Yeah.
when you're really connected. So I could see how, yes, of course, if you're well balanced and aligned, you know, with the
Yeah.
universe, whatever you want to call it, with God, it brings the best out of you, and you could share it through music, which we've seen a
Hmm.
lot of beautiful music. But then it could go the other way around. It could be the shittiest music out there, and then people going crazy because I'm sure you experience a lot of exhaustion and
Yeah.
emotional numbness with the music industry, probably anxiety and all that, because you're dealing with a lot of people that are not well aligned. I mean, they're beautiful professionals, they're very
Yeah.
talented, but the lifestyle, the balance is not there. We know it. People see it all the time, right?
Yeah. Well, and that
I'm sure
yeah,
that was,
that's exactly what hit me. I mean, because I think that was also, at the time, because I was green to the whole music industry until I started touring, and as I started to see, once again, I understand every industry has to have its things in place to be able to make money and create some type of
yeah,
income, but unfortunately, a lot of the music industry, I do see it changing slowly, but I think a lot of it has been built upon consumerism and the consumerism of art. Those two things are not in congruence at all, and we have to find a new way to be able to allow artists to live in accordance because, like you said, a lot of these artists, unfortunately, because they realized like they had to do what they had to do to be able to get to the top. It
yeah,
doesn't make them a bad person, but unfortunately, kind of that analogy of selling your soul to the devil. I mean, there's some reality to that I've woken up to, and even in more recent years, I think in many ways, certain forces within my energetic field or whatever perspective you want to look at it, I feel like were protecting me because there were certain moments where I was getting higher and higher up on the food chain. And then it was almost like I hit this invisible door because my angels were like, no, we need you over here because there's a lot of dark stuff we don't want you to see yet. And we need you to heal a little bit so that you can come back and engage with this. And, I think that's like been a big part of it too.
right. Yeah, no, I can see the pushing through. You're trying to be like, most performers, they're all pushing through in
Yeah.
reality. And like you said, there is, money involved. We have to find a way to make a living, and then
Yeah.
it's an artist of all kinds. It's not easy. So much
Yeah.
competition, so many performers that are exceptional, but there's just not enough room. So you're
Yeah.
going to push through the best you can. I
Yeah.
completely understand where they're at. Like I did mention to you, I do have a couple friends that are still in the music industry. I grew up with, let's just say, out of 10 of my friends in high school, six of them were rockers, right? They
Yeah.
put together a band, and they lasted a good 10 years. They actually went on the road, small band, through mostly California, and they did well. But you could see, even so young, 18, 19 years old like you, they were exhausted. It was beat.
Yeah.
And I went because I wanted to
Yeah.
experience it. Oh, man, can I be a roadie for you guys? I
But
went to a few of their shows in LA. I forgot the name of these old clubs where everyone used to be invited to. What was it called? You probably heard of them, but it was where all the rockers used to go in the '90s, and it was a fun experience to check it out. But yeah, the lifestyle afterwards, staying up till 5, 6 in the morning, just
yeah.
hanging out, partying. It could get crazy and very exhausting. Yeah, I have like I told you, lead guitarist Andy Quinn. He's still out there, but it's not his full time gig. He's
Yeah.
actually a park ranger, by the way. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's
we went to
awesome.
we went to San Diego State together, to San Diego State University, and then things happened. We went into both of us studying kinesiology. He ended up in the rec center for the county, and then he became a park ranger. But as a
Wow.
park ranger, he's had the time to where he travels. He tours with oh my God, I blanked out. But he tours around uh, the United States. Sometimes
Yeah.
he'll go to other countries, and he's found a way to balance the
Yeah.
lifestyle because he's married. He's got one. I think his son's about 7, 8 years old now, so he's got
Yeah.
family. He's the park ranger, and he tours with Frankie J. Sorry, which
Yeah.
is from
Yeah.
the too. He tours with Frankie J, and he manages to balance it. He's got a good head on his shoulders, and he's a healthy guy, so he's found a
Yeah.
way, like yourself.
Well, it's like it's a double-edged sword too, because I reflect on a lot of the stuff that I went through, and the pain teacher totally came to visit because I was, yeah, doing these very important gigs that are on national television and stuff like that. And of course, like, luckily I held it together, performed pretty well. But there was this deeper part of me that was so anxious. I had so many obsessive compulsive, like, kind of thought patterns that were running my mind. And I would have to sometimes almost shake myself in the middle of a show, like, hey, we're playing music. Like, get
Right.
out of your head. Like, we're on stage. Like, we don't have time for this. But it was really the pain teacher was just knocking, asking me to find more alignment in my body, because I realized so much of those things that were happening to me, and this the kind of a special, like, mental type of intensity I was going through, really wanted me to find a more grounded approach to life. But then the other side of it that I think is, and I even write this in the book that I'm soon to be releasing this summer,
Awesome.
it's really about understanding that art is, to me, one of the universal languages. And I feel like part of my engaging with art is what kept me balanced, because it's really, on a scientific level, it's connecting those left and right brain hemispheres, and it's allowing us to enter more into that parasympathetic mode. So even now, with clients that are high performers and people that have looked at everything and done all these different hacks for their mindset and what have you, they notice that as soon as they draw on a piece of paper, even if they consider themselves a bad artist, a lot of people say, oh, I can't draw, I can't sing. But if you just start drawing squiggly lines on a paper, it shows on a scientific level that it's pulling you more into that wider perception, that right brain holistic perception that allows you to naturally start to become in your healing mode. So my theory is that a lot of this bad lifestyle habits, as much as it was deteriorating me, I feel like the only thing that was keeping me alive was the fact that I was engaging with art all the time. And, that's part of, I think, the magic of why we must engage with art, just the same way that we're looking at nutrition and hydration and all of these lifestyle factors around us. Art, to me, is the same, or if not higher up on the totem pole than many people consider.
Right. Okay. So yeah, you're basically saying, this chronic sympathetic dominance that we fall in, it pretty much could affect the creativity and our intuition. So if we
Yeah,
use that, we get tap into our curiosity, our creativity, like you're saying, doing some artwork or stuff like that helps bring you into that parasympathetic state more, so that you can stop
absolutely.
being so chronic. And you know what, chronic, whether it's chronic sympathetic dominance or chronic inflammation or chronic, it's we have too much of it, and that leads to obviously disease. So yeah, that's super important. That's a great thing you brought up there. Now, do you think people have normalized feeling, I guess I could use the word terrible. You think people have normalized just feeling terrible? Because I notice that when everyone's in that fight or flight mode all the time,
Yeah.
whether it's competing, working, I need to make more money, but at the same time, you're feeling terrible. It seems like,
Yeah.
especially you're in that field of music, does it seem like it's something that's been normalized?
Yeah, I would say the funniest thing as I started to not only heal myself, but then even develop programs for artists, some of the backlash I got is, "Oh, well, artists, they thrive on heartbreak and addiction, and that's what makes good music." I mean, I understand definitely we alchemize a lot of the more negative emotions and thoughts and experiences in our life regardless, but I think we need to invent a new paradigm because, like you said, people are really assuming that that's their baseline. And for me, I've had moments where, even just in certain parts of my life, even in more recent years, where I may have gone through, some bout of food poisoning or some type of ailment or sickness or pain, I noticed that I'm in such a negative type of thought loop, and even just my whole, I mean, luckily I'm at the point where I can sit and just observe it almost like I'm outside of myself. But when I notice all the different things that are coming up in my mind and in my body, just because I'm in so much pain, I can't look. It's like the blinders are on once you're in that mode. So it's like you think that is your reality, but there's all these amazing things happening around us. And especially when we can look at it with gratitude and be able to see what's actually happening for us, not what's happening to us, which is much easier said than done, of course.
Yeah,
But
of course.
man, it's crazy because that has really given me a lot of insight into thinking, okay, wow, if this is the baseline of people, no wonder they're so angry and pissed off and polarized by the news and all of these different things around them. Because I mean, it's night and day for me because I'm generally a very positive, open-minded person, but that type of feeling when you're in pain, I have so much compassion for people that are in that chronic state because we just have to figure out a way to flip the polarity for people. That's kind of what I've started to look at. And a big part of my philosophy, even, is that, we're an antenna. And a lot of people are living with an antenna full of static and all sorts of different energy qualities that are not serving their highest good. And it's not about adding more things into their life. It's actually about clearing away the muck so that their natural innate vitality can be expressed through this antenna, and we can start to sense and feel what should and shouldn't be in our life, whether that's food or relationships or whatever we're putting into our body or around our body. And that's been a huge aspect for me, especially as a musician, but I think it can be applied to anyone when we realize that we're just trying to learn how to become a clearer antenna so that we can be the vessel for our highest good and our dream.
Absolutely. And let's switch it up into that. Speaking of, being an antenna, those are environmental stressors that we're talking about, invisible interference that we have. So you are pretty much very involved in that. So you talk about
Yes.
environmental interference. What does that actually mean? What
Yes.
first led you to this thing called what is it called? Biogeometry?
Biogeometry.
And
Yes.
then there's another one you use, radio.
Radiesthesia.
There
Yeah.
you go. Those two. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So, well, I'll first say, most people, they're looking at every single thing that's going into their body, but rarely, I've noticed, especially surprisingly in the health circles, people are still catching up to what's going around their body. And a lot of these things are invisible, so it's hard to sense things like electromagnetic frequencies, things like geopathic stress. And these environmental stressors are a subtle static on our nervous system that we just consider to be normal, like we were talking about. But once you start to change that, and especially for me in my own life, as I started to wake up to the fact that there was all these invisible things happening around me that are very scientific. A lot of people consider these esoteric principles. Yes, there is a certain esoteric level to them, but they are proven and grounded in a lot of scientific research over hundreds of years. And yeah, for me, I had a very interesting experience where I lost hearing in one of my ears for about 2 weeks, and I was attending the Czech Institute at that time. And I happened to be attending the Holistic Lifestyle Coaching Level 2. And
Okay.
Angie Czech is actually also trained as an associate biogeometry practitioner. And I had talked to her and consulted about what I could maybe do for my ear because as a musician, I was freaking out because that's my livelihood. And I mean, anyone, honestly, if you can't hear in one of your ears, it's pretty annoying. And she was like, I've actually been being trained in this science called biogeometry. I could do a little 5-minute session for you. She did a whole, basically audit the way that I am now doing with a lot of my clients and found a very specific biosignature that Ibrahim Karim has mapped out, the creator of biogeometry, and they're all energetic signatures that are like acupuncture meridians, but for the inside flow of certain organ patterns and pathways in the body. Pretty much, she found the one that was disturbed that is usually innate to all of our bodies. She drew it on my arm and sent me on my way, and I was thinking, okay, I don't know what this is going to do, but I was just open-minded at that point. But the next morning, I woke up and my hearing came back within 30 minutes of waking, and I was starting to ask questions like, okay, how did a shape possibly do this? And I got the first book, Back to a Future for Mankind by Ibrahim Karim, the creator of biogeometry. And that just started to answer so many questions, even that I actually had in my awakening when I was working with the shaman, a lot of stuff about ancient Egypt and a lot of these different
Right.
things about these esoteric principles that are very important to our society for a reason. Like there's a reason that our souls are being called to study and look at these different things about these ancient cultures. But he was answering it in such a way that it felt almost familiar in a certain way. And it just took me into a whole different rabbit hole to the point where I bought some of the tools. I didn't even know how to use them. I just was like so fascinated. I wanted to figure it out. And there was all these synchronicities that kept happening where I would meet someone that either took the classes or, just so many strange things to the point where I finally signed up for some of the classes. And now I'm 3 years in. But I signed up for the foundation course with Robert J. Gilbert, who's like such a legend. Rest in peace to him. He changed my life forever. And he was the premier teacher of biogeometry in America. He was also one of the premier teachers of sacred geometry, which is a different thing, but it's somewhat related. And he just is another one of those polymaths that just really was changing the face of the earth or helping people reawaken to, I think, what we all innately know. And between all of that and in the last 3 years of study, I'm now luckily about 6 months away from being tested to become an associate practitioner. And all of that to be said, it gave me this very tangible way to experience what's invisibly happening around us because Ibrahim, as an architect and engineer, has spent the last 50 years creating a system where the way I define biogeometry is we're using the design language of nature and the quality of shape to harmonize and create a balance for all the biological functions, not only in the human body, but around us, in a way that harmonizes things like the electromagnetic frequencies, the geopathic stress. And he builds a lot of this not only in the ancient Egyptian temple sciences, but also French radiesthesia and German radiesthesia, which is, I like to define it as like a type of microvibrational physics that happened in the 30s that studied very specific wavelengths and gradients that happen in our environment, but through different quality scales. So being able to sense that, a lot of people relate to water dowsing. That's something that still happens a lot today. But a lot of people may not know that for thousands of years, people were able to find extremely good quality water in a certain location that eventually became what we call today a sacred power spot. And there's usually some type of underground water crossing at a certain type of angle that has a certain quality of water that's not only good drinking water, but it also has a healing quality to it that a lot of these ancient peoples noticed that certain animals would go to, or certain plant vegetation was growing extremely rapid in a way that they started to bring their sick people to that place and noticed that they were also healing. So then they started to build their cities and towns based around these sacred power spots. But what is cool is Ibrahim really, because of his background as an architect and understanding angle and all of these different qualities in an environment on a scientific and engineering level, started to reverse engineer what the French were noticing because a lot of the French tools were actually taken from places like the Egyptian Waj pendulum, for instance, was a pendulum that they use in Egypt. But he took a lot of their knowledge and started to build and really look at all of these different qualities that were happening, especially in places like the, Giza Plateau or these sacred power spots in Switzerland and different places around Europe, because you start to notice that once you awaken to these things, a lot of the ancient cities were actually built around these power spots. They were not just placed randomly. There was a very specific configuration that created an energy quality that was healing and helpful for people to be in that all the time. And they were connecting their buildings like they were a living organism, also with the materials that they were building them with, the placement. And so once you start to see all these things, it really opens up a whole new universe, and you can start to interact with this in a way that's very tangible. And that's what biogeometry really lays out so well. And they have incredible classes. The foundation and advanced classes I recommend for everyone and anyone that is interested in this stuff, because you don't have to become a practitioner. This stuff is, to me, life development classes that anyone can use, because anyone that's involved with any type of healing or energy sciences or Reiki, they can now use tools to empirically test if what they're doing is actually creating the result that they desire. And for me, that was one of the most powerful things to see. Even, drawing a circle, you realize that every time you engage with geometry, like drawing a circle, there is a center within that circle that is creating a certain quality that is organizing all of the different qualities around that circle. And the circle would technically be like a boundary, because you're creating a boundary with a line. But that, once again, is a lot of what biogeometry plays upon, is this centering principle. So there's a center beyond duality, beyond space and time, that when we are accessing and activating and amplifying that within a space or geometry or anything around us, that is naturally going to allow everything to come back into balance. All the yin and yang principles start to become this thing that you don't have to worry about so much, because the organizing center that created the physical aspect of it in the first place is being amplified and rebalanced in a way that all of the things that naturally exist in nature will exist as they're supposed to be. And I mean, it's a hard concept in many ways for people to understand, but that's something that has absolutely changed my life and my whole outlook. Because I mean, the kicker is, I've realized that when we're playing from that no mind, childlike essence, whether it be, music or dancing or whatever it is that we're expressing, we have that quality of sacred power spots in the music or whatever we're creating. And to me, that is the new golden age that I think we can all engage with, because we're starting to see that if we are building our buildings, we're creating all of our products with life force in mind, then we have a whole new way to be able to exist that is much more balanced, and is something that I think is something we should reckon with, because
Absolutely.
electromagnetic frequencies are heightening at a whole new level. And for me to be able to not fear something like electromagnetic frequencies as much, and to see that, yes, it is a problem. Like, I'm not saying we can just harmonize it all and it's going to go away. We do have to create awareness around it and be real. That, like, for me, that's like part of the tactical aspect too of a lot of these sciences I'm studying. But how can we engage with it in a way that, because it's not going away, we have to find a way that we're going to harmonize it. And luckily, biogeometry has clinical blind placebo trials that have shown the efficacy of these shape qualities in spaces, and that it cancels out the detrimental effects of things like EMF and geopathic stress.
Right. And a lot of it is also hidden history. Okay. So I believe that we've known, our ancestors have
Absolutely.
known. It's just been swept under the rug. Obviously, a lot of people are skeptic about this. Like you said, it's invisible. But, it's being practiced, and it's been practiced everywhere. Like, there's a lot of intentional areas. Even Joshua Tree, there's some areas where, they go there and they practice. I have not been there, but I have a lot of friends that go up there and they do
Yeah.
ceremonies there because of the energy that's being created there. You mentioned water. Lourdes, France, speaking of the
Yeah.
French, that was intentional. How did they build a cathedral there, right? Almost
Yeah.
above this this special miracle
And
water that.
that's a perfect example. That's one of a major sacred power
Well,
spot.
it's been known, and these are thousands of years back. I mean, hundreds of years back, so thousands of years back, you find these places where how did these humans even know these waters were there?
Yeah,
You said they had the technology or the know-how,
yeah,
wherever it came from. These are things that we need to stop being, I guess, less skeptical. I mean, we believe
yeah,
easily in the microwave oven, the 5G.
yeah,
It's invisible. And guys, we are your Wi-Fi. Do you believe in
yeah.
that? Yes. Why can't you believe in these
Totally.
beautiful positive frequencies that can actually help us, right?
Right.
Beginning from the sunlight, the signal from the sun, the grounding, all that stuff that's invisible. We should, like you said, I think it's something we should all study for our personal and from home, right? Start
Yeah,
building the groundwork from your home and then share it with your family, your kids. Yeah, it's something that's huge that we're going to be able to balance if we do
yeah,
practice it. Because, like you said, yeah, the EMF, we're going into 6G, is not
yeah,
going anywhere. This is business, it's
yeah,
money. Multi billion trillion dollar businesses, they're not going anywhere. What can
yeah,
we do from our home to
yeah.
fix this or make it better? And that's something that you're touching on really, really, really well.
Yeah, well, and it's like even I've been thinking on the big picture because I like to always even remind people too. Like I entered this as a skeptic too. It's not like I just like all of a sudden believe this. But once you start engaging and reading the material that biogeometry has put out, and all these, and there's not biogeometry is not the only one, but I would say it's one of the more complete systems that's on the earth today, and one of the premier, I would say, systems that really identifies and creates solutions. But I start to think about, especially the fact that there has been government-wide projects in Switzerland where they harmonize the entire town, because people were having serious issues with the cell towers, and it was amplifying all the geopathic stress in the area, which are basically sick Earth energy lines. They're energy lines that naturally exist. They're not necessarily a problem, but they are the communication network of the planet. And when we add all of these different energy qualities that amplify the more negative effects of these things, then it becomes a problem. And in places like Switzerland, when they applied the entire citywide solution, I mean, this was not verified by them. They had a third party government official scientific team basically go through the whole town and verify that people were having less epileptic seizures, birds and bees were coming back to the environment. Cows that were having infertility after the cell towers were installed were now back to normal. And even I love the way that Ibrahim jokes. I mean, because people are like, "Oh, it's placebo." You just pulling Jedi mind tricks on us. But then he's like, "Well, does a cow speak Arabic?" I mean, it's like when you see it in the plants and the animals, and you see a stark difference between both of them. I mean, it was to the point where he was actually given the key to the city and was celebrated, because the mayor saw that it basically turned the entire town around from being this place that a lot of people were getting in fights, people were having headaches, epileptic seizures, to then all of a sudden, just literally within a week of installing all these shapes and really putting things together, things were turning around. So, I mean, it was a very different place once they had put that in place. And I start to think about, on a wider scale, how can we maybe, with all the things that are happening with Project 2030, with things like smart cities, I mean, my kind of Trojan horse idea is thinking, how can I become someone that may be part of creating a smart city that's actually healing and bringing the good quality energy to people, in a way that, is hard to even fathom, because of course there's all these electronic sensors and
Right.
so many different things that are, in play that, could be seen as really dark. And I mean, once again, I definitely recognize there are definitely dark forces in play here, but at the end of the day, why amplify the dark forces when we can focus on what's actually going to solve the issue?
Exactly. And you mentioned that study. We've actually seen studies that are actually the reverse. What has made people sick, epileptic. I think there was a study in France, something, I think it's the CIA. I'm not sure who, but I can't quote it. But there's been studies on the opposite where they've introduced these frequencies, which are negative frequencies that affect like the mind and people go
Yeah.
crazy and stuff. So those studies, and they're old studies too. I think it was 50s or 60s. So those studies are there. And now this study actually shows a positive study where we could actually get these modern homes with all the modern tech environment and switch it around from instead of being so drained, feeling so drained at home, in
Yeah.
the office, right, in your car,
Yeah.
where we then switch that around in a positive way. I like the what you mentioned. The cow doesn't speak Arabic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I use placebo on animals. It's
Yeah.
right. I mean, you can see the
Yeah.
difference. This, the difference in that. Maybe we could call them we could call these places, instead of smart cities, we call them what can we call them? Something about spark cities. There you go,
Park
spark.
Cities, yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, well, and it's like, I think it goes back to like this deeper level too of humanity, where another analogy that I love Ibrahim shares, he has a friend named Dr. Fish, and he's in his lab, and he's down in the ocean, and he's trying to invent water. I mean, that's literally humanity at its peak right now. We are in a lab trying to figure out how to create things that will take carbon out of the atmosphere and create oxygen. Well, have you ever heard of a tree? I
yeah,
mean, it's like these different things that, nature is one of the most powerful networks that has always been here. And I think it's so funny that we think we're so smart and that we can use artificial intelligence to create life force, but that is like it's just a perfect example of where our brains are at. It's like that type, almost like that Einstein quote of, if we try to use the same quality of thinking to solve the problem that we created, it's not going to solve it. We have to go beyond and look at other ways that we can, look at what's in our environment, and
yes,
and
absolutely.
it just keeps compounding. I mean, I've been really blessed to, here in Austin. I started working and learning a lot from this legendary building biologist, and his name is George Swanson, and he's gone all over the world, working on, and building biology, for people that don't know, is in many ways related to biogeometry. Even the creator of building biology was friends with Ibrahim Karim, but it's more based on the ecology and the materials and the sustainability, but in a way that is life-giving as well. And especially when we look at, we're in a age where all of our buildings too are built by, a lot of these materials are infused with the byproducts of petroleum,
Right.
and we're one of the only countries, actually, which is kind of nuts to think about. We have so many advancements, yet there are so many other countries that have understood that if they keep their buildings healthy and safe, that their occupants are going to live longer, and they're going to have less cost for health care. They're going to have a lot of different things that are solved, at least on a baseline, because here we have buildings that only last between 20 and 40 years, and most of them are ridden with mold and EMF and all of these invisible things that we can't see. And it's not like this is a new concept. This is something that has been solved by places in Germany and
Yeah.
France and even China. I've learned some of their new, like, skyscraper buildings are built with things like magnesium oxide, which is fireproof, mold proof, EMF proof, bug proof, and it's a widely applicable product that most of the world is familiar with, but it's been heavily suppressed here. And it's
Well,
something
yeah.
that, even talking to George, I mean, he's really helped me understand that they purposefully keep it out of the education system, even in architect school and construction school and construction management, because it would threaten the entire petroleum based product industry that we've built so many things upon, starting with our lovely John D. Rockefeller, thanks to him.
As if they don't get enough from pharmaceutical already. Like they're using their petroleum for that, for gas, for it's greed. It's greed at its finest in America. Unfortunately, all the gas offs, that's happening with these buildings. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's only in America. Yeah, I've seen the Chinese. Oh my God, it's impressive.
yeah,
Japan, China, the European Germans, they don't have those issues. We do, and it's going to be profit based,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
Absolutely. Now, if the body is electrical by nature, shouldn't we be paying attention to the electrical environment around us? That's like a no-brainer, but we're
yeah,
not. And like you say, they're not educating us, first of all, from grade school on about this at
yeah,
all. They're not going to educate our engineers, our electricians, our are architects in this invisible energy, right?
Yeah.
Let's ask. I'm going to ask you. Show us something. I know you've been doing things on.
Yeah.
Give us a little demonstration.
Okay, so, well, there's a couple different tools that we use. There's some that have very specific dials and mechanisms that you can tune to certain color qualities. This one is for people that want to see it. This one is called the ICUP, or the Ibrahim Karim Universal Pendulum. It's basically a neutral pendulum. It does have certain shape information that allows it to resonate with certain qualities beyond just the physical, because a lot of what we talk about is that shape is one of the few qualities, for instance, color. It is a quality that we perceive with our senses, and our brain is projecting and creating the color that we see, but color only has a certain range or octave, where even a musical tone also has maybe a little bit of a wider range, but still, because it has multiple octaves, but it still is something that is imperceivable beyond the physical. And so we talk about how shape is something that can resonate and connect to these different multidimensional aspects. And a lot of Ibrahim's work is very much inspired by the work of Pythagoras and the science of harmonics. Harmonics actually goes beyond music, and this idea that anything that the monochord, anything that's double or half the length on a monochord will resonate through sympathetic resonance. And so the same can be applied to something like a neutral pendulum. So in the French research, they actually found that if you were to take something like an object and hang it on a string, and as long as it had no charge to it, it was basically neutral, you could tune the string length like you're tuning a guitar to the point where it resonates with certain things. And so with this, what I'll kind of demonstrate is, and I always remind people, because it's been fun sharing this on Instagram, because I got a lot of people that are really inspired and a lot of haters too. And I kind of enjoy the haters because, they think it's just like some crazy woo-woo thing. And I'm kind of here to just, it's fine. I'll take the arrows in my back to show people the amazingness of this. But you are doing a lot of practices when you're in the classes. Like, it's not like you just get a pendulum and you can just automatically do it. Like, I've especially applied a lot of my knowledge of music into pendulum work. So I do a lot of practices like almost every day where I'm learning how to get out of my own way, because what is interesting about biogeometry is we use physical radiesthesia, and that's what I'm about to demonstrate. So we're not asking any mental questions. It's all based on certain qualities, certain frequencies, certain harmonic lengths that then go into resonance and create either a clockwise or counterclockwise motion, mainly with this neutral pendulum. And that will give us an indication if something is gaining or losing life force, because this pendulum is specifically catered to sensing and life force in general. And so the French had this technique that actually French medical doctors used in the 30s called medical radiesthesia. And radiesthesia is an interesting term. It basically means sensitivity to subtle energies. And so what I do with this, this is, once again, like, I've practiced a lot to be able to do this, but I first just have all the string in my hand, and I'm just basically divvying out the string. And for me, I'm going to do a connection to my personal wavelength, where I am just slowly divvying out the string, and I'm only using my awareness, like my tuned awareness, a clear mind state awareness, and I'm just observing my reality in front of me, and I'm tuning into this specific vibrational quality of my own energy field. So I keep divvying out the string, and once it gets to a certain length, it starts to spin clockwise. And I really, for all the people that have been accusing me of moving my arm, you really are using this as a qualitative antenna of your own energy field. So I'm not here to convince people, anything about me being perfectly still and I'm a statue. It's just that this is tuned in a way that if I put my attention and awareness on my general energy field, and I like to use my hand because it's just an easy way, and that's what they teach us. But then I can actually go around the room, for instance, and sense, what might be weakening or strengthening to me. Another really cool thing about this pendulum And with a lot of like neutral pendulums, a lot of the time they teach you with a like a little plastic acrylic sphere just on a string because it's even more neutral than this. But you can use this also for polarity. So there's a different string length that's beyond my personal wavelength. And if I get it correct, it will be based on polarities. I believe this is correct. Let me just check. Yeah. So, for instance, every part of our body has a different polarity. So, the top of my hand has a positive polarity. And then if I flip it over, it automatically stops and will go the other way. And it's just showing that I have a negative
That's
polarity
going counterclockwise now.
counterclockwise. Yep.
When you turned your hand, it went counterclockwise.
Exactly. Because now it's not tuned to personal wavelength, it's tuned to polarity. So also I like to show people, for instance, each one of our fingers has a different polarity, which they've shown this in lots of different things. But every time I go to a different finger, and of course, like I've done a lot of practice, so I make it look pretty easy, but it's pretty fascinating because then you can start to look at your whole, and what's cool is actually they show you with a like a battery. So like you start with a battery, and because it's a known energy field that you have a positive polarity and a negative polarity, you can learn to sense polarity and it becomes useful for certain things. But then there are certain instruments we have that we can tune specifically into things like earth grid radiation, so we can learn to dowse for very specific type of geopathic stress. One is called the Curry and the other is called the Hartman, and those are two very prominent earth grids that are over the entire globe. They exist in like a cube-like structure and they go up as high as a skyscraper, and they are part of the innate communication network of the planet. They're not necessarily bad, but they do create a lot of problems today because they are many times crossings I've found in people's beds that are, in a very simplified way, they're not only dehydrating the cell, but they're scrambling the energy quality of certain cells in our body. And they create this type of vortex that's sucking the life force out of us. And it basically can lead to things like, as far as cancerous growth tumors, like it's can be very serious. I always remind people it's not necessarily the only cause if someone has cancer, but I always recommend people go look at the research, like someone like Kathy Batchelor, Earth Radiation. She was a German dowser. It's one of the few books that was converted from German to English, but she has, I think, 10,000 case studies. And time again, she was hired by doctors because they were treating their patients with medication that usually would work perfectly fine, but then they would notice this person would just keep having the same issue, and they created a relationship with Kathy. And so they would send her to their home. She wouldn't know anything about the case. She would find that there'd be a crossing or an underground water stream going under someone's bed at a certain location. And, say she found that it was going through their stomach. Well, turns out that they were dealing with some type of either stomach cancer or a tumor in their stomach. Other times she would find something going on with someone's brain. They were having like a mental breakdown dysfunction, or even she did a lot of work with kids in school systems. And she would see that a lot of the time they were just sleeping on a place where literally like two earth grids were going right through someone's head. And what's fascinating about that is that, once again, it's not something that we have to fear, because there are ways that we can transmute the detrimental qualities with things like biogeometry, using certain shape information, certain tools. Like I'll kind of show you, like, just because I have one right here. I mean, this is one of many things that we use. But, you can tune a specific dial, and if you put that on, for instance, a crossing, where there maybe under the bed, you put that on a crossing where there's two intersecting lines, all of a sudden that's converting both of those lines into a more harmonic, life-giving quality. And so just a lot of amazing applications that you
That
can
makes
use.
sense. And there is science out there about these conversions into like the frequencies, right? Like I know
Yeah,
the company Aries Tech, they're not
yeah,
blocking EMFs, they're actually converting it, right?
yeah.
So it becomes a protector. And you're saying just with simple tools like that. Now, it kind of reminds me of like the natives. They had these, what do you call those? I don't know if that
Dream
has something to
catchers,
do with it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maybe those had
Totem
something
poles.
to do with that.
I
Who knows?
definitely, I mean, what's crazy is once they show you the history of things like architecture from the vantage point of an energetic science, you start to see that all of these ancient civilizations were using extremely tactical ways to harmonize certain areas of the earth. And, one of the first things that most people recognize in the history is, things like menhirs and obelisks, because a lot of these megalithic stone structures,
Right.
these are stones that are, 20, 30 tons. I mean, they're not easy to move. And the research shows that these are from like 300 kilometers away. These are not just like right there. So these people took the time to move a 20 or 30-ton stone across 300 kilometers to put it in a very specific area. And a lot of the research is now finally catching up and showing that there's so much quartz content in these granite stones that they
Yeah.
got, that it's an amplifier for that quality. And, sometimes people that are very scientific minded, I remind them that it can be sensed on some electronic instruments as like a scalar wave. It's kind of in that range sometimes, but it also has to do with the geologic mineral deposits that are interacting, also the magma that's moving under, the fault lines, all of these geologic things that people have found in science. But now we're seeing that, these stones were put in a very specific place, and natives were doing this all the time as well with things like totem poles and different placements of their objects, and I mean, I've heard stories of even natives that as soon as they got pushed into reservations where they were sleeping in square buildings, that's when they started to get sick.
Right.
And when someone asked them, why are you getting sick? They said, well, we used to sleep in circular buildings and now we're sleeping in these square buildings. And, and even on a feng shui type of, a lot of people are familiar with this from Vastu and
Yeah.
feng shui. Those are also very, grounded sciences that have been around for a long time. And Ibrahim does a really good job at respecting those. Like, he's studied those sciences very deeply to be able to integrate a lot of that information, but for a modern human, because feng shui is an amazing tool, but it doesn't necessarily always take into account things like EMF or geopathic stress in the way that is being affected on us in a modern life.
Now is that so? Those lines I've heard you call them ley lines. Is that correct?
So yeah, I'll make a little distinction. So ley lines and geopathic stress lines are actually different. So geopathic stress lines are found all over the earth. They're part of the natural communication network, like I said. Ley lines are generally good quality energy lines that are usually connecting sacred power spots. But there's also some really cool information about how a lot of these sacred pilgrimages were people that were initiated in a certain culture or some type of lineage, that they knew how to create ley lines, because ley lines in certain places have been actually created by man, but in a way that is very advanced beyond, a lot of our own understanding today. Creating, that's why even a lot of these different pilgrimages, they may need to go north straight to this one place, but they're going like in a zigzag all the way up there, because and visiting each place and carrying that beneficial quality through the ley line. So that's a little distinction. Ley lines are a little bit more rare.
Okay.
Geopathic lines are a little bit more common because they're everywhere.
I mean, like you said, it's something not to be concerned about. Don't get too worried about it. But again, it comes back to
Yeah,
awareness. To be aware.
exactly.
I'm glad you're putting it out there. I think you should do more on that. It's great
Yeah.
awareness to have because you
Well,
could.
it hit a spark with people. It was interesting. I would say, I feel very blessed, whatever's happening, even in this kind of part of my life, because as things are starting to make sense in my own kind of multidimensional world, it seems to be reflected because I've had a couple videos go viral where I'm talking about geopathic stress, and it seems to like hit a chord with people in a way that I didn't expect. Like, I just posted basically of one of my lectures, like a clip of one of my lectures that I did recently. I'm teaching some of the important things that I think everyone should know from the biogeometry courses. And it was really interesting because people were really interested or really triggered. Like, it was really interesting.
Yeah, this is fascinating. I love it. Yeah, you should keep doing it. All right, so we're
Yeah.
gonna switch it up here. Let's get into some fun questions for you that only you
Yes.
can answer instinctively. So I
Yes.
call them the
Okay.
intentional rapid fire questions. All right.
I love it.
First thought that comes to mind. Very easy for you. So I'm gonna ask you morning ritual.
Morning ritual. Going outside, getting my bare feet on the ground, hydrating with good quality spring water when possible, making sure I get good minerals added if it's not spring water. And, I kind of have this hydration cocktail that's my part of my morning ritual where I do like lemon and sea salt. And, sometimes I'll add like silica and different minerals that I know we're deficient in, and I just make, like a pretty big jar, and I'll go outside and I'll just stand on the earth. Hopefully the sun will be shining, get as much sunlight on my bare skin. And then I like to do things like qigong, and I'll even do kind of like some lymphatic drainage type of like tapping or skin brushing. But yeah, that's pretty much most of it. And I try to spend like the first hour just blank mind, just processing dreams, kind of taking into account. Sometimes I might journal, but I try to stay away from technology as much as possible for the first hour if I can do it.
How long is that? What does it look like as far as time for you? Is that like an hour, 30 minutes?
I would say, there's to be realistic, on my good days, it's an hour because I'm really moving slow on purpose. But I would say on certain days where I got to get somewhere, if I try to wake up at the same time every day. But sometimes, because of the way things are scheduled, I might have only like 20 minutes. But I always make sure first thing I do, actually something that I think is a good tip that I didn't know for a long time. I tongue scrape as soon as I wake up and I brush my teeth because there's a lot of like biofilm and things like that in our mouth that we don't want to recycle into our body. Then I hydrate immediately. I fill the big glass with water and I put all my kind of things in it. Sometimes I might take a couple supplements as needed, and then if I'm really tight for time, I might just do 5 minutes of like some type of cleansing breath where I'm just doing like a qigong movement just to get some blood flowing and kind of clear my mind, and then I'll turn my phone off airplane mode and get flooded with the all the cortisol from what I have to do for the day.
That's for sure. Yeah, and that could be, see, that could be 10 minutes right there. Sometimes you're not going to do everything. You're not
Yeah,
going to get to do the grounding. The sun, it doesn't look good today. I'll skip that. But I think
yeah,
if you could do from everything that you covered there, if you even do 20% of it, and the beginning ones are easy. Tongue
yeah,
scraping with the copper tongue scraper, right?
yeah, yeah,
Adding these trace minerals into your water. Boom, 5, 10 minutes. You're already at a great start. And
yeah,
the breathing techniques. Yeah, it's things that are free. Like I always say, things that are free. You
yeah.
don't have to go to a biohack. You don't have to go into a. I'm not talking bad about them, but you don't have to go into a hyperbaric chamber every morning to this facility and do.
No,
No,
it's so funny. I mean, yeah, like I laugh because I think it's just the nature of like my soul, but also like a lot of my mentors. I am not anti-biohacking, but I'm very much like using the free stuff like you're talking about, like breath, sleep. I mean, water is pretty inexpensive. Things like that, movement pretty much free. These things are so important, and most of the time people don't spend time actually moving all the stagnant energy from the entire night that we were sleeping. So it's just, yeah, it's a non-negotiable for me. I make sure I do that every morning.
absolutely. All right, back to the rapid fires. One thing creatives need more of.
I would say creatives
I know they're
is
getting.
just slowness, like honestly, just moving slower.
Yep, because they have plenty of chronic. We were talking about chronic sympathetic phases.
Yeah,
So
because like
slowly.
even just like I notice, if I wake up and say I'm not on the schedule that I was hoping to be, if I like rush, it does nothing for me time wise except agitate my nervous system. So why do that? If I'm late, I'm late. I call people, let them know I'm running late, and that's what it is. But like I've noticed, like if you can just consciously move slow, you're not actually going to be that much slower as far as time wise.
Right, and that's a big underrated recovery practice, if you ask me.
Yeah.
Slowing down. Yep.
Yeah.
You talked about breath work. You do some meditation there. Best way to regulate after a stressful day. How you unwind?
Best way to regulate after a stressful day, I mean, for me, is definitely doing something that can immediately like flip the switch on my mind because I have a very strong like mental loop kind of mind that will just like get really focused on hyper focused on things. So for me, it's definitely music, even just doing a little doodle in a sketch pad. And, sometimes, I mean, even just like enjoying a good story. Like it's so underrated. I've gotten back into reading fictional books, and I'm such a nonfiction guy that reading fictional books is so healing for me because it really, you forget like your life, for a moment, and you can just take a break so that when you come back, you're like, actually, it's not as bad.
That's great. I mean, most of us will jump on the TikToks and the Instagrams and scroll for 2 hours and then go to bed. Oh my God. And it feels horrible. It just don't
No,
feel
it
good.
feels horrible. And I mean, I'm not perfect. Like I really have realized, I have it here. So I have now, I still use an iPhone for everything, but I have what's called like Mudita. It's technically a dumb phone, but it's the Mudita Compact. It's all e-ink. It's free of blue light. And it is like, very basic, but it has like GPS navigation, a lot of things. But I have had to make barriers for myself because as my social media traction is growing, like, thankfully, I am like learning that like my addiction to my smartphone is even that much stronger. So it is important to be real and find ways. That's what works for me. Most people are
So
like, you're
you're using that
crazy.
for reading? Are you using that for reading or is it also communication?
Most of my communication, I mean, it's been I'm still kind of on the on ramp with this. It's been about a month,
Say
but
the
I
name again so we can
generally,
post it on here.
what?
What's it called? What's it called? Say
It's
the name
called
again.
the Mudita Compact.
Okay,
It's
great.
Dita, and then compact is actually spelled with a K. So it's like
Okay.
yeah. But it's a really cool. I researched a lot of the like dumb phones out there because they're kind of making a comeback. Because I realized like realistically, I'm not gonna be able to have like a little Nokia. I need to be able to sometimes navigate. Only a year into being here in Austin, Texas, I don't know every single spot yet, and certain things like I keep. For now, I've kept emails off there, but one of the things that I like about this one, because I researched all of them, this one specifically, you can sideload apps, meaning you can get certain apps that are not natively on there if you need them. So, for
Right.
instance, I got Waze on there. I got things like my banking app, like Venmo, things like that. But overarching, I'm literally trying to keep myself as much off of like, I definitely notice I'm kind of attached to seeing emails and, did someone, comment on my post? Things like that. So just trying to create a little barrier for me has been super important.
Oh my God, that's great. I'm going to look into it myself as well. I heard
Actually,
A lot of Gen Zs are going into the iPods. Like
yeah.
becoming very popular on eBay.
Well, and what's funny is actually I will say one of the things that I think, I mean, I was already like really into like the idea of this, but I think what sold me is there is literally an airplane mode switch that turns off all cellular communication and the cameras.
A
So
real
like
airplane mode, right? Because our
real.
airplane modes are not real airplane modes.
Yeah, exactly. So it's real airplane mode where it basically cuts off any of the electronics other than, whatever you could you could read like an e-reader on here or something like that. But
That's awesome. All right. Well, let me ask you this last question. What's one belief you had 10 years ago that completely changed?
mm, ooh, this is a good one.
I know there's many
Hmm.
we all believed, and we were like, whoa.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that let's see. I would say that, yeah, probably like the fact that we have to have discernment to be able to be in our power, and that discernment doesn't mean judging someone or judging one thing, but knowing that our time is limited in this opportunity we have in this human body. And I kind of, I think, had weaker boundaries, 10 years ago. And still, it's not like I'm life perfect, but it continues to be a thing I've noticed that is a game changer for my life is seeing that when we have the discipline and all the things going for us, we have to have discernment of who we're letting into our field on a daily basis. And sometimes that means like cutting out things that might not be the best for us, and it's not easy, but it is one of the best game changers of our lives.
Absolutely. I agree. Now, if you were to go back to, let's say we put you on a time machine, take you back to the the 17-year-old version of you before you became famous at 18.
Yeah.
And you had time to speak with yourself for a couple minutes. What would you tell yourself, that young version of you back then?
I would tell him, you don't have to have it all figured out. Don't worry about showing people what you can do because the essence of you is literally enough. And you don't have to prove yourself through performance because it's going to burn you out, buddy.
Okay, great. That's a great short advice right there. It's like, and the funny thing is that I hear it a lot when I ask that question to a lot of my podcast guests. It's short, it's simple, it's pretty much almost exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Once we learn all that, but we have to go through it, right? I mean, we can't. I know it's
Yeah.
fun to go back, like want to go back and say, "Don't do this, and go through here." Go. But the reality is, we're here to learn.
Yeah.
Sometimes you're willing to say, you know what, I wouldn't change that. Now that if I really stop and think about it, I wouldn't change what I went through because here I
Yeah.
am, I arrived here. This is me because of all that. So yeah,
Yeah.
it's powerful, but it's fun to go back and see what we
No,
would tell
it's
each
true
other.
because yeah, I mean, in this, the human experience is so important. Like, I wouldn't change a thing. I don't regret a single thing because I feel like every part, when we can reflect, is part of the evolution of what really allows us to, know ourselves and know thyself and be able to be, someone that can self-observe and be able to make improvements based on what we experienced that we didn't like. Because if we're just stagnant, we're not making any choices based on like fear and like just kind of not wanting to make a mistake, that's actually where the real problem happens.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and speaking of health and wellness, we've reduced wellness into metrics, a lot of optimization, stacks,
Yeah.
hacks. I'm not saying I don't do them. I do, I do get
Yeah.
involved with them. It's fun, but we've reduced it too much to like, excuse me, we get a little bit of water here. But I was saying, we've reduced everything to metrics, to optimization, and
Yeah.
many people are still deeply dysregulated internally, even with all the biohacks. So maybe intentional living starts by creating safety in the body
Yeah.
again, again. So that's why I appreciate this conversation with you. We touched on a lot of the invisible things that yeah, it could be disruptive, but we have ways to, I guess, fix, right? To improve it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Awesome.
that's why I do what I do. I mean, seriously, like, I feel like part of my life's purpose is to create a bridge for people to understand that it doesn't have to be this perfect system that we create. We just have to learn how to be able to tune ourselves and come back to the original essence of, who we are. And I feel like a lot of my work, even the kind of entry point that I do with people, the kind of fallen frequency energy audit, is really just to help people see, what's happening on an invisible level that we not might not be sensing, but also looking and being able to connect them with, even if I'm not able to solve maybe their deep root cause issue, I have a network of amazing people that have changed my life that I will happily connect people with, because for me a lot of this stuff is about the long game, like being able to have longevity and like fully live life and not, suppress ourselves from experiencing whatever we need to experience to be able to evolve.
Yep, that's awesome. And I'm glad you said that. You have a network of people that you could, you know, share with others. Likewise, I'm doing the same thing. And this is one of the reasons I do the podcast because I want to introduce people like yourself and having people connect with you. So, in saying that,
Yeah.
where can people find your work?
Yes.
What?
So the best place to go if you want to learn about like what I'm currently offering is fallenfrequency.com, fallenfrequency.com, and that will at least give you kind of a definition and more insight into what I'm offering as far as like the way that I kind of bring people in. I usually hop on a discovery call with people and just, see where they're at. Like, I just really want to be the vessel of healing the best way I can. And so that's really the first place I always tell people to go. But also, I share a lot on my Instagram. I'm starting to share a lot more on TikTok as well. But that's the Adam Andre. That's like the tag for Instagram. And then also, I'm really excited. I will say I've been working on a book for 2.5 years. I have
Awesome.
actually written the thing. I have definitely
Okay.
used a lot of different ways of figuring out how to basically create the framework for what I believe is part of my philosophy of becoming the clear antenna. And it's really for people that are, very sensitive, creatives, people that may feel like they're hitting burnout and looking for the next place to go. And just really, it's just trying to lay out the framework of how I look at the world so that people can understand and maybe engage and be inspired to do the same for themselves.
Awesome. Yes, I'm glad to hear that. You're going to be an author very soon. Welcome
Yes.
to the team.
Yes.
2 books. It takes time, a lot of effort, a lot of thinking,
Yeah.
especially when you're doing it solo. You're not using AI, you're not using ChatGPT, you're not ghostwriting,
Exactly.
it's your work. It's just more, I guess you appreciate it more yourself, even if it doesn't go far, but you have this.
Yeah, I just want to have it for myself. Because the best thing about, I'm sure from writing your own book, it's like writing this book has honestly been probably mostly for me to understand how I want to live my life. Because, I mean, of course, I'm doing all of the things, I'm a living example of everything I'm writing about. But at the same time, I'm like, wow, actually, like, I should be doing this even more now that I'm writing about it, or even, sometimes I include these little scientific, clips of understanding why doing what I'm suggesting might be of benefit. And then I'm thinking, well, shoot, that makes me want to do this even more now that I'm learning
Right.
the science behind
Good.
it. And even just like, I've found it's such a healing process. I mean, I am the crazy person that I'm actually hand illustrating everything because I have that background. So even just doing the illustrations has been healing for me because I'm engaging with my artistic endeavors again on a page and figuring out like how can I make a visual that represents like what I'm talking about, and not, plugging it into AI or anything like that. And, it's just, doing my best, but it's been awesome. It's very healing.
Yeah, and that's the great thing about doing these consultations, the coaching, the assessment, the workshops.
Yeah.
Eventually, you'll probably be doing workshops after your book comes out.
Yeah.
It keeps you connected as well. It's like I'm not just teaching these people; I'm actually reteaching myself because you tend to forget things that you're
Yeah.
actually learning. And when you start reading your book,
Totally.
oh my God, that's right. I should mention this again. I need it.
Totally, totally. And I will say, as you're saying that too, I do have a couple lectures that I did in person that I recorded that I now also have on YouTube for people that want to maybe go a little bit, on a deeper level of understanding. I basically tried as a student to put together all of the things I find most important for the general public to understand about why biogeometry is one of the premier sciences we should become familiar with. And I really try to do my due diligence in my research, but it's fun because I think I have now three up there on YouTube. And I think it's under the Fallen Frequency Coach. That's my YouTube channel. But that's also a place people can go as well.
Yeah, and I think when you go into your Instagram, you do have those links there too, right? I think I saw.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
great. So I'll make sure I put that down there for the for our audience to see and start following you immediately, absorbing all that great info. So,
yeah,
folks, the goal isn't perfection here. It's awareness, it's alignment, it's intentional living in a modern world, right? We're not going to escape
yes.
it. So, this is how we age with intention. Anything you want to tell our audience there, Adam, before we go?
I would say yes. Just remember that we are a living vessel of the earth intelligence. We live in the earth, not on the earth. And so when we can come back to that innate intelligence and start to rewire ourselves to clear away the muck and become that vessel for ourselves and then our relationships and our family and then the world at large, a lot of things will improve in this, epic of time that we're in right now.
Thank you so much again.
Yeah.
I appreciate you for coming on
Yeah. Appreciate you.
first, and we will spread the word. Thank you so much,
Absolutely.
everyone.
Thank you so much.